Hey, what is up everyone? Ben at ProFixer, and today on the bench I have a broken A50. This one came in and we ordered the screen for it, and now it's time to do the repair. So we're going to walk you through each and every step of the repair to show you how to repair the A50 from start to finish. Everything on my workbench, including this awesome blue heat mat, is linked up in the description below. So be sure to check those out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the like button. Without further ado, let's get started on this Samsung A50. The first thing you want to do when repairing really any kind of device is warm it up on a heat mat. This A50 has a plastic back on it versus some of the glass ones on the other Samsung models, so it is a little bit easier to pull off, but we still want to heat up the phone itself. It makes it come off so much easier because it releases the adhesive and makes it a little more malleable and reduces any kind of damage that you put to the inside of the device. Luckily, this one's plastic, so it makes it a little bit easier to remove than, let's say, like some of the Galaxy S devices. What we'll do is we do take a little razor blade and we do want to insert it into the edge of the device to get underneath the back cover. What we'll do at this point is you can make a little space, and you do want to use a little card. So we're going to take one of these. We love the plastic playing cards versus the paper ones, and we're just going to slide it right in the back and work around the edges. It's a little bit easier, like I said, than the glass ones, and it's not as scary to do because if you pry too hard, the worst that you can really do with this is put a little dent in the plastic versus actually breaking the glass. So we're going to lift up on this, and as you can see, you can just start trying to pull this off, and it comes off pretty easily. So going to work up around the top, being careful to continue being delicate with any of the flex cables inside. You don't want to just rip off this whole top too hard because you could damage some of the other components. So always take caution no matter how unbreakable the back is. I do want to make sure that you don't break anything else. So we're going to work around the edges a little bit. And let's see here, we're still kind of stuck. So lifting up right there, right around the camera, and we are off. So now it's time to open up the back. I already know what this type of device is like. We don't need the heat mat anymore because we've already removed the back. So we're going to put the heat mat off to the side, and we're just going to work on our regular blue mat. So using a Phillips screwdriver, I really love these tools. That's actually the name of the brand. You can pick these up at Injured Gadgets, linked up in the description below as well. We're going to remove all of these screws here. So go ahead and take those out. Okay, now that we've pulled out all of those screws, it is time to take out the SIM card tray. I do use my bottle of alcohol to do that. I just use the needle though. Make sure that there's no alcohol in there. Give it a little squeeze so that if there's any drips inside of the nozzle, they don't get inside of the phone. Insert it into the hole and press, and your tray should pop out. I'm going to pull that out the rest of the way. We'll set that off to the side. And now, taking a look around the phone, there is no other trays that need to come out, so it's time to start pulling off this back housing. What you can do is, you're going to power the phone off as well. There we go. This particular one does have a bezel design. It's like this like clamshell almost kind of thing that clips on the back of the front bezel. So what we can do is we can take a razor blade and fit that into the edge of the device and give a very slight pry to it. We don't want to pry too much because we could cause damage to some of the clips or to the frame, but we just want to work that in between there, and which can be kind of difficult to get started. But once we get it started, sometimes you can run your fingernail around and pull the rest of it off. Working around the corners, be careful because it can break your fingernails, which does hurt a little bit. And now we're going to work through on the other side there. There we go. And once you get kind of both sides done, the corners start to release, and it makes it a little bit easier to pull open. If you do need to, you can use like an iSesamo tool once it's already slightly open to safely pry inside and to release some of these clips. You don't want to pry too hard though. any of the marks that you do put on the bezel, they're going to stay there, so definitely be careful to not pry too hard. Now that we have that done, we're going to set that off to the side, and we're going to start removing some of these inner pieces. It's pretty easy to do. We're going to go ahead and remove the battery, and then we're going to remove number 1 and number 2. So we're going to lay those off to the side. You technically can leave these connected to one board or the other. They'll just kind of dangle off, but for ours we're going to remove them completely. We're going to remove the fingerprint scanner at the bottom. There's 2 screws that hold that in. The A50s are pretty cool because they do have the fingerprint scanner that goes through the screen. And make sure you set those screws off to the side because they are shorter than the rest of the screws. If you put a long screw in one of these short spots, you're probably going to poke the back of the OLED, which will damage it. Now that we look at the bottom of this, we can pull out the bottom charge port. As I don't see any other types of screws in there. So just kind of using your fingernail, you can pull up on the bottom of this, and these actually are adhered in. So just pull up pretty safe, pretty lightly, and we should be able to pull this out with a little bit of persuasion. So let's see. If you do have a tough one, you can pull up on the board like this, and you'll probably hear the adhesive slightly releasing. Just let it release and let the tension of the board release that. Don't pull up because you might damage your board. We're going to just lift up on that slightly, and now we have the board that's loose. We're going to pull the coax cable up, and then we are going to move the battery tab out of the way and lift up the rest of the motherboard. So now that we have this out, we can set that off to the side, place it somewhere safe so that you don't mess up any of those cameras. And then now it's time to compare our new screen to this bezel here to see kind of what parts we need to move over. Depending on the screen, sometimes they do come with like an ear speaker or vibrate motor already installed. So we're going to kind of see what comes in this one. This is an official Samsung service pack, so it does come with the most things installed compared to some of the other devices. So, or some of the other screen variations that you could purchase. The cool thing about service packs is they will come with these little heat thermal dissipation pads, and that makes it nice because you don't have to transfer those. And then also the little grommets for the proximity sensors, those will generally be moved over as well. But we still need to move over the vibrate and as well the ear speaker. A lot of times you may be able to pull these out without using any kind of heat, which we're going to try real quick because sometimes they do come up pretty easily. It actually is pretty tough. If I had this on a heat mat, it would definitely come out much faster. So I really do like heat mats, but since we're using the other one and it's already off to the side turned off, we're just going to pry on these and they should come out just fine. Looking at the ear speaker, there is a little space up here at the top that does have a little gap that you can actually pry within. That's going to help you lift up your ear speaker to pull it out. So pulling that one out and moving it to the new assembly works just fine. And then now meticulously look over your board and make sure that you've moved over everything, including these little grommets if necessary, the thermal dissipation pads if needed, and then anything else that you can move over, go ahead and do that now. Because if you don't and you reassemble it, you could have a device that develops issues later on because it's not cooling properly, or just because you forgot to put one of the grommets for the proximity sensor, and then during calls it won't shut off like it normally should. So now that it looks like everything is moved over except the battery, we're going to put this actually on the heat mat. That is one thing that I do want to make sure that we do warm up, because if not, it will not be warm enough and we may actually bend the battery, causing damage, and it would not be a very good day. So we're going to place this on the mat, and we're going to wait about 2-3 minutes, maybe 5, and then we will we'll pull that battery out. Alright, so now that it's sat for just a few minutes, it should be hot enough that we can remove the battery safely. One thing I do recommend is using a little bit of acetone or alcohol and dripping it around the edges. This will help to release the adhesive and make the battery even safer to remove. If you try to remove a battery whenever it's dry, it actually will stick pretty difficult, and it'd be very hard to get out of the frame. And we don't want to put any kind of nicks in the battery or any kind of bends to it. And as well, sometimes the outer packaging of the battery can stick to the adhesive, where the inner cell will kind of pull from its own packaging itself, and that can be a problem. So now that we dripped a little bit of acetone in there, we're going to use our iSesamo tool and kind of pry along the edge, which it actually came up pretty quickly. It looks like that worked just fine. Acetone generally is quicker than alcohol, but you do have to be careful with acetone because it can eat away plastics and cause more damage than alcohol ever would. Alcohol is a very safe choice as long as you use it properly and don't just pour it everywhere. Acetone, however, you do need to be very careful and skilled with it and make sure you really know where the liquid is going. Now that we have everything pulled off of this device, we're going to lay it off to the side and then continue working on the new frame. All of this adhesive looks like it is completely gone. We're going to go ahead and just roll this right off. And you don't have to make this, like all the residue necessarily come off of here. This will be bolted into the housing itself and clamped in there. We don't want to put a lot of adhesive because if this one does come back from a screen repair, you could cause damage to the battery itself if you adhere it in too much with too much adhesive. So we're going to roll this off of here. Here we go. Where is my... And we're going to put a little bit of Tessa tape along the edges. Not too much because Tessa tape does hold very firmly, but 2 little strips just like this will work just fine. So go ahead and snip in those, lay that off to the side, and making sure that you don't have any kind of balls of adhesive. You could clean the rest of this with a little bit of alcohol to just kind of make it look a little bit nicer, but it's just really residue that's on there. There's no real necessity as far as cleaning it other than, just for looks or cosmetic sake, but everything will operate just fine how it is. I'm going to place that back into the frame and kind of work it in just a little bit. Kind of always massage in any kind of adhesive pieces to get that adhesive to hold tight. We should be done with the heat mat now at this point. We're going to set that back off to the side and continue working on the device itself. We're going to pull this little cover off of that heat dissipation pad, which there we go. We're going to pull this one out from the fingerprint sensor. And then we're going to move this little cable into its spot after we pull up the little bit of adhesive cover there, and it should hold in just fine. And it looks like it has, let's see, 2 little dots where it all aligns, and it sits right there perfectly. So first things first, let's go ahead and put the motherboard back in. Slipping that under the battery, and then running the coax down the edge of the phone, and then placing this back in. And actually there has been an issue with the A50s that I've noticed on a couple of these that we've done. For one, the screw hole doesn't actually fit up here on the top motherboard, and I wasn't necessarily going to bring this up, but we do actually run into that into this particular video. And then also there is a little nub down here on the frame that doesn't match up with the motherboard or with the daughter board itself. What we'll do is we'll use one of these flat snips and we're actually going to cut it off. With that cut off, it'll allow the daughter board to sit properly. You want to use flush cut snips because if not, it will sit up too high. Now the daughter board is going to sit in properly, and the top motherboard won't get its screw that it normally had, but it holds in just fine. go ahead and put the coax down the edge of the device into the little crevice that it was made for. And then let's go ahead and plug in the rest of our flex cables. They're labeled. Number 1 is on the left, and then number 2 is on the right. Don't forget your fingerprint sensor. I'll lay that down in there and clip it in, and then we're going to install the 2 screws that originally held this in. And remember to use the short screws. If you use the long screws, you may actually damage the screen itself. Alright, so looking at everything, it looks like everything has been placed back into the device. We do want to plug in the battery. If we forget that now, it will not power up later. So we got that plugged in, and then make sure that everything's sitting flat. The top motherboard should sit flat, and then as well the daughter board on the bottom should sit flat as well. So taking this back piece here, since we don't have that top screw on this A50, we're going to be very careful with replacing this back cover. If the motherboard gets lifted up and gets out of place and we try to snap this down, we could cause damage to the motherboard. So just ensure that it's sitting naturally flat and that it's not trying to pop up on you. And as long as that's the case, you'll be able to slowly clip the top back on. And now that we have the top piece on there, we're ready to put the bottom on, which is pretty easy as well. Just apply a little bit of pressure and squeeze lightly and make sure that everything is clipped in. With any of these bezels that clip on the back like this, always look around the edges and make sure that you don't have any kind of separation, even in the slightest amount, because if you do, like we see here, you can actually squeeze that and it will clip it back into place. So now that everything's there, we're going to go ahead and turn on the device and make sure that everything is functioning properly. Powering it up, it will just take just a minute, but it shouldn't take too long. If it gets hung up on one of the splash screens, then you may have an issue, and I'd recommend pulling it all apart, putting it back together, and retesting again. There could just be a loose connection causing it to get stuck, but as long as you've done everything correctly, it should power up just fine. Alright, well perfect. It powered up and it is ready to test, which it looks, as far as the touch on the screen, everything is working properly. Go ahead and install the back screws on the device as well. Insert the SIM card tray and then the back glass or the back cover. As long as the adhesive is still good, you can reuse the original adhesive just fine. Especially if the customer is using a case, it'll help to keep that back glass on, preventing it from falling off. So we're going to put these in real quick. Alright, perfect. And now that we have all the screws put in the back, I'm going to show you my one little trick on how to make sure that this stays on. It's Primer 94. You can pick this up on Amazon, and it works incredibly well to act as an adhesion promoter. So go ahead and put this around the edge of the device, and this will ensure that the adhesive, as long as the adhesive is still on the back of the device, or on the back cover, it will stick properly. And so now put a little bit of adhesive or Primer 94 around there, and then we're going to install the back plastic. And now if we take a look around the edges, everything is sitting completely flush and completely as it should. So if we use this device and test it, we'll notice that everything is working completely fine. I'd recommend doing some test calls, testing the camera, Wi-Fi, all the other connections, and making sure that it all functions before handing it back to your customer. As long as you followed all the steps in this video and did it all correctly without damaging anything along the way, your Samsung A50 should work just fine. And as I mentioned before, everything I use in this video is linked up in the description below. So be sure to check that out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button. If not, the other button seems to work okay too. But I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. See y'all later.